1 Kings chapter number 19 tonight. 1 Kings chapter number 19. While you're turning, let's just remember to pray for a lot of people on the East Coast, a lot of churches on the East Coast. I know in our home area, most of the churches weren't able to have services on Sunday. We're not able to have services again tonight, and they are expecting another winter storm to hit this weekend on Saturday and give them another few inches of snow. And so Nashville, I don't know if you've seen the pictures coming out of Nashville, but they got hammered with an ice storm, trees and power lines down everywhere. I'm wondering if all those people from California that moved to Nashville are rethinking their decision about right now. When you go about a week or so without power and you're freezing cold and the ice and the roads are iced over, they might want to come back, but probably not. All right, 1 Kings chapter number 19. I want to say thank you to Brother Ray. Last week he introduced us to this chapter last Wednesday evening, setting the table for a look at this important chapter in Elijah's life. And, you know, there are some passages in Scripture that become extremely personal to us. I don't know if you have passages like that. There are passages of the Bible that I go back to and I read often. I go back to and I think about often. And it seems like as I go back to those places often and meditate on those places often, I always come away with something new. I always see and sense something that I didn't see before. And we can learn from those passages again and again, and I believe this is such a passage. Over my life, I've heard many, many great sermons preached from this passage of Scripture and have been exposed really to a variety of perspectives on this event, this record in Elijah's life. You've got everything from, on one hand, a very scathing condemnation of Elijah and his actions, to, on the other scale, very sympathetic and compassionate to what Elijah did here in the first 8 verses of this chapter. Does Elijah deserve to be condemned here, or does he deserve our compassion? You know, I think it's difficult to say. I often say this: life is messy. And it is. You know, life is not perfect. Those guys down here yesterday putting up that dividing wall, they're professionals, but I think they were cursing me under their breath because they they were struggling with that thing. And it really had nothing to do with the wall. It had to do with the room that we were installing the wall in. I asked him, I said, did you bring your room stretcher with you? He said he forgot that at home. Ceiling's not flat, it's curved. It doesn't look like it, but it is. It's curved, and so one side of the wall is higher than the other, and it was just a mess to deal with, and life's that way. And we joked about it yesterday. We joked at the end of the day, after they got through cursing me, they were joking around, and just, you know, nothing's perfect. We live in a fallen world, and we're fallen beings, and we're not perfect 100% of the time. In fact, we're not perfect probably 50% of the time. There's only been one who ever lived a perfect life, and he wasn't Elijah. And by the way, he's not you either. And so your life's messy. My life's messy. It's not perfect. I make mistakes. I make wrong decisions. And more than anything, I believe that these verses reveal to us that as humans, our lives have limits. We have physical limits, we have emotional limits, we have mental and psychological limits, and we even have spiritual limits. We are, somebody said it this way, we are men at best. Fallen, fleshly, and sometimes surprisingly fragile human beings. I mean, we wouldn't expect Elijah to be fragile. Up until this point, till we get to chapter number 19, we've just seen him as a lion. We've seen him bold and brash and courageous. And yet, humans can surprise us sometimes with how fragile they can be, from the best to the weakest of us. And so let's look at what we can glean here tonight out of these verses when life hits its limits. I want you to notice, and this is when life tends to hit its limits, is when there is an abundance of problems. And that's when it hits Elijah as well. Notice the problems of Elijah. Elijah's coming off, as Brother Ray mentioned last week, he's coming off a great spiritual victory, a great spiritual high, and we hardly ever expect that problems will come so quickly after such great triumphs and victories. And yet Scripture and life have countless examples of just the opposite of that thinking, of problems coming actually very rapidly after success, after prosperity, after victory. The problems for Elijah were many. Some of those problems came from outside sources like Jezebel. Some of them were inward battles and inward struggles that we're going to see. And then some of them were self-inflicted problems. We do that too. We all face those things. We sometimes have problems that come at us from the outside that we don't have really any control over. We just have to deal with. We have problems that we're struggling with in our mental capacity and our emotional well-being and psyche. We have those problems, and then some problems are created by us, making bad decisions and bad choices, and we're going to see all three here tonight. Notice, the first problem was a devilish persecution. A devilish persecution. Look at verse number 1 and 2. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and withal how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. And Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. Here is a man of God. He just did exactly what God told him to do, and now he's being persecuted for it. He's being attacked. When we do well, when we serve the Lord and follow and obey His word, we can be sure that the fiends of Satan will not come out and congratulate us. Satan and his hordes and his followers are not going to come along and pat us on the back and say, Great job. I didn't expect that from you. I thought you'd back down. I thought you'd be a coward. They're not going to come out and applaud us or congratulate us in any way. No, they're going to go on the offensive. They're going to go on attack. They will not concede defeat. It is the nature of evil to be aggressive. We can see that in our country. We have a very small minority of very loud antagonists who are disrupting everything in this country because it's the nature of evil to be very aggressive. That's just how evil works. I'll give you for example. The last 2 Saturdays that we have went out soul winning, went out on outreach. And I've been encouraging as we go out this year, knock on more doors, speak to more people, take that next step. And as we've done that, I want to tell you the last 2 times that we've done that, the last 2 Saturdays, within that day or a few hours, I've gotten some pretty nasty texts and phone calls. I haven't told you about it until now. But you can be sure Satan doesn't like us coming into his territory. Satan doesn't like it when we're out doing what the Lord wants us to do. That's just how evil works. We were on the south side of town a few weeks ago, and almost before I got home, I got a text from a pastor. What are you doing? Don't you know? My church is in this blah, 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 and all this. I'm like, I didn't know we were Christian gangs. You know? I didn't know we had territory that we had to stay in. But that's just the attitude. JW's come to my home, but I don't go on the phone and text the Kingdom Hall and say, what are you doing? I just ignore them. That's how God's people handle things, but the devil doesn't play that way. The devil goes on the attack. Satan's not going to throw you a party when you decide to follow the Lord. Have you not figured that out by now? Some of you figured that out real quick when you got saved and you made a decision to follow God. You found out really quickly that Satan is not going to be happy about that. He's not going to applaud it. He's going to attack you. And I don't think Elijah was surprised by it, but it's still something to deal with. It's still difficult with us as humans to deal with. We don't like being attacked. We don't like being persecuted. We don't like opposition. But Satan's not going to back off. He's going to turn up the pressure. And when you decide to follow the Lord, you can expect it. Just knowing that he's going to do that doesn't make it any more pleasant to experience. Some have suggested that Jezebel was just bluffing. I would say to you, first of all, it's not in her nature to bluff. They say that because why would she send a messenger instead of an executioner? Well, I think so because in her pride, she thought it was going to be easy to capture Elijah. In her pride, she thought that it was going to be no problem, and she wanted to instill fear in his heart. And Satan loves to do that with you too. He wants to cause you to fear. Pride causes people to make bold declarations thinking that they're going to be able to do exactly what they say they're going to do. And I believe Jezebel in her pride not only intended to kill Elijah, but took glee in the fact that she was going to do it. She is going to take his triumph. She is going to take his moment of victory, and she's going to rain on it. She's going to rain on his parade. Satan will do that in your life too. You'll come to church, you'll hear a message, God will give you victory over something you've been dealing with and something you've been struggling with, and before you get to the car, Satan's already going to try and rain on your parade. Because you're going to walk out there and you're going to have a flat tire. And all that joy and all that rejoicing and all that victory, Satan's going to try and take that away from you. That's just how he fights, folks. So don't be shocked by it. Then we see, that was problem number one, a devilish persecution. We see problem number two, a depleted prophet. And the Bible says in verse number 3, and when he saw that, I don't have time for this, but be careful where you look. Right? And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. Most people attribute what transpires here in Elijah's life to Elijah probably being physically emotionally, mentally, and spiritually drained, exhausted. Imagine one prophet standing all alone against 450 false prophets. Imagine the boldness and the courage, the fortitude of spirit and character to stand up against not just the king, but an entire nation. Imagine the power and the strength and the energy that had to be expelled to pray and pray and pray until it rained, and then outrun the chariot before it rained. All of it had taken its toll. We humans have limits. We can't do everything. We can't be everywhere. And those of you who have been here this last year know I have been hitting on this a lot. Because what happened to me last year was at least in part because I had hit my limits. Which is why we started having outreach just every other Saturday instead of every Saturday. The Lord showed me people need time to rest. We are in such a hustle and bustle society that we wear ourselves out. And when we're worn out, we're vulnerable. When you're tired, physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, you are in a very vulnerable situation. You're going to do things and make decisions that you wouldn't ordinarily do. Elijah does that. I mean, ordinarily, a threat from Jezebel on this nature would be met with a comeback. I mean, we don't have to back up far, just the last chapter. When he comes to meet Ahab and he says, oh, you're the one that troubles Israel. And he says, I'm not the one that troubles Israel. You're the one that troubles Israel because you've forsaken God. But Elijah doesn't respond that way this time. You say, why? I don't think for one moment he was out of God's will. I don't think for one moment it was because there was some sin in his life. I think it was completely because he was depleted. You see those Snickers commercials, don't you? You're not you when you're hungry. You know what hunger is? It's a depletion. It's your belly saying, I'm depleted. And then we get hangry. Those of you who have known me for the last 19, 20 years know you've probably never once seen me lose my temper or blow my stack. I don't know that my wife's ever seen me do that. But I can get cranky. I can get grouchy with the best of them. Get me tired, get me hungry. That's a lethal combination. I can get pretty perturbed when I'm that way. I'm usually the nicest guy in the world. But when I'm hungry and tired, my wife says, the bear's out. It's time to feed the bear. Why? Because we have limits. We all have limits. You can only take so much emotionally. You can only take so much physically. You can only take so much mentally. You can only take so much spiritual battling. We have limits. One of the few times that you won't find Elijah praying in response to life's challenges is here in verse number 3. He doesn't pray, he just reacts. An already weary prophet now goes on the run. The Bible says that he arose and went for his life. He was afraid. Having battled and dealt with anxiety myself, I can say to you that you can have fear when you know you ought to have faith. You can still have fear. You can, when you're dealing with depletion and anxiety that comes often from that, you can have fear when you know it's not rational to have that fear. And that fear can overtake you and it can overwhelm your soul. And there were times, this time last year, where I was dealing with anxiety and fear and I didn't even know what I was afraid of. You say, that's irrational. I know it is. And you're trying to step out of yourself and say, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I just got to believe in God. I just got to trust in God. And yet the fear still comes. And I tell you, that's really disconcerting. And I'm sure it was for Elijah. I imagine the whole way he's on the run, he's thinking, I need to have faith, not fear. I shouldn't be feeling this way. Why am I so afraid all of a sudden? I've never been fearful like this before. A year ago, I was in a constant state of anxiety and fear. Often, as I said, not even knowing why or what I was afraid of. But those of you who have dealt with anxiety and panic attacks can, your heart rate gets into a high rate and it stays there. And your heart is just racing. I would lay down and my heart would be beating so hard that I was shaking the bed, just trying to lay down. My head was excruciating pain from the release of the flight or fight hormones that your body naturally releases and produces when you're in a state of anxiety and panic. I knew it wasn't rational. I knew I had nothing. I didn't even know most of the time what I was afraid of, but fear was overcoming me. And I felt powerless to stop it. I don't know if you've ever been there. I hope you never are. But I want to tell you tonight, if you are there and you have been there and you will be there, you got a pastor who understands. I wouldn't have a year and a half ago, but I do now. One thing I've discovered is that kind of fear is often very connected with being physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually depleted. This time last year, Dawn and I were just about to end about a 3-week sabbatical that we took, and a lot of people have asked me, Pastor, did that sabbatical help you? Did that sabbatical solve your problems? It didn't solve all my problems. But I want to say it was a Band-Aid. It was the rest that I needed. And I don't know what would have happened if I had not taken that. If those who went to spiritual retreat this summer, you remember there's a lot of things in life that drain our tank. And I hope you remember constantly, and I need to get back to it because lately, with some of the construction and things going on at the church, I haven't been able to take a day off, and I've just been go, 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 go. And if I'm not careful, I'll drain my tank and I need to refill it. I truly believe that Elijah's exhausted, depleted state was the cause of his response of fear. The same man who normally would brush off such a threat somehow now succumbs to it and runs for fear. Why? Because life has its limits. And Elijah had hit his limit. And I want to say to you tonight, if it can happen to a man like Elijah, it can happen to you. Some are pretty harsh on Elijah here. I think probably a year and a half ago, I might would have been. They rail against his lapse of faith. I'm thankful the Lord is much more gracious. In fact, as I've reread and restudied this passage, I don't find the Lord ever condemns Elijah at all. I just see compassion. You want to know why? For he knoweth our frame. He remembereth we're dust. He knows we have limits. That's not to say Elijah did everything right, and I'm not excusing some of his actions here. And I'm not saying that it's not sinful to respond to the challenges of life with fear instead of faith. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying God's a practical God. And he knows that we're dust. David said in Psalm 56:3, listen to this verse, what time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Did you hear what he said? Let me say it a different way so you can understand exactly what David said. David did not say, if I'm afraid. He said, what time I'm afraid. In other words, there was the expectation that even a man like David is going to struggle with fear in his life. Even a man like David expected anxiety and stress and pressure and worry to come into his life. And David said, when that happens, I've made a decision. I'm just going to have to trust the Lord. Fear, anxiety, worries are struggles that are common to every life. It doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't excuse them, but it just means you're human. Somebody said this, you can be full of faith and still empty of strength. So we see an outward problem, a devilish persecution. We see an inward struggle, a depleted prophet. But then we see a third problem. We see a deliberate parting. Now this problem is self-inflicted. It's little, it's minor. You might have missed it when I read it, but I think it's vitally important. Look in verse number 3 again. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Let me get this straight. The man that God has deliberately chosen and called to be a minister to you, to help you when you're struggling, to minister and encourage you when you're dealing with tough things, you deliberately and intentionally distance yourself from. You withdraw yourself from that man. He's a nameless person. We don't know who he is. We just know that his purpose in life was to be a servant to Elijah, was to be a help, an assistant to Elijah. And if ever Elijah needed assistance, if ever Elijah needed help, it was right now. And yet Elijah deliberately and intentionally parts himself from that person. You say, that doesn't make any sense. Folks, I've been pastoring for over 20 years, and I can't tell you how many times I see people going through things, struggling with things, and the very first thing they do is stop going to church, is withdraw, part from those very people that are there to support them, to deliberately part from those people that are there to help them, there to encourage them, there to cheer them on, there to lift them up, there to be a sympathetic shoulder to cry on, Those people that God has chosen and put in their life deliberately to minister to them, that's the people they withdraw from. I've seen the same thing play out dozens and dozens of times in the course of ministry. Let me tell you, when you're tired, go to church. You say, well, I don't feel 100. Go to church. You'll feel better. When you're overwhelmed emotionally, I've just got a lot on my shoulders. I've just got a lot going on in my life. I just need some time to think. Go to church. When you're struggling mentally, battling the devil or the flesh, go to church. When you're struggling with prolonged illnesses, you're sick from cancer treatments, drag yourself if you must, but go to church. You need church. And that doesn't, by the way, that doesn't just come from Scripture. Though they wouldn't say church, medical doctors know the importance of social support groups for battling through the problems of life and even prolonged illnesses. They will tell you the death rate is much higher and lifespan is much shorter with those people who do not have a social support group to lean on, what we would call a church. I told you one of the books that helped me a lot was written by a medical doctor by the name of Richard Swenson. He wrote a book named Margin. In chapter 7 of his book on Margin, he lists several ways in which to restore emotional energy. Number one on his list to restore and cultivate emotional energy is to find a social support group. He's a Christian. He mentions church. This is what he said. I'm quoting right from his book. Not only common sense, but now also good science. The importance of social supports is irrefutable. We do not simply think they work. We know they work. The mental health slogan, "Good friends are good medicine," is not a cliche. It is state-of-the-art therapeutics. Last year when I was struggling, there were times that I could have withdrawn. There were times that even as a pastor, I could have called up Brother David or called up Gabe or Brother Stephen and said, I'm just not going to be able to make it. And when you're struggling like that, it's very easy to withdraw and just stay home. But I want to tell you, I forced myself. Even when I was having panic attacks before I got here, I forced myself to go to church. And I want to tell you, and my wife can back me up, I always left better than when I came. And you will too. Elijah made the worst decision in this whole thing. I think it's just a little thing, but it was a big thing. He deliberately parted from the one man God had put in his life to be a help to him, to be a minister to him. You need people. And the worst thing you can do when you're struggling, battling, fighting against the problems of life is to isolate yourself from others. You say, well, I watch church. It is not the same. That's like refusing to eat and just watching the Food Network. Well, I watch food. I sometimes think I gain calories by just doing that, but I know I don't. It's the same thing. You'll never get what you need just staying at home watching. I'm on the fence. Sometimes I tell Hannah, we're not going to put any more money in this live streaming. We're not going to do anything else. And then sometimes I have people that are sick and I know can't come, and I know it's a blessing to them, and then others who are sharing it with other people, and I think, okay, I know there's a purpose, there's a reason. But there is a growing number of even big-name pastors who are to the point where they're getting ready to rip it out because they're tired of people substituting that for the warmth and the fellowship that is needed in the church. Our Lord knew that it would be virtually impossible for us in our frail, fragile, fleshly state to handle the problems of life and to be victorious in doing so without the aid of others. So he gifted us the church. It was his gift to us. Don't withdraw, go to church. You say, well, I don't feel like it. Go to church. They don't like me down there. Go to church and make them like you. But go to church. Spiritual men have a bad habit of ignoring the limits of life until they become overwhelming. Surely there are other problems that we don't have time to expound upon, but let's move on to a second thing. I know you think, well, that was a long one. So we're going to move quickly. Notice the plea of Elijah. Look at verse number 4. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree and requested for himself that he might die. And said, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life. We can be thankful, folks, that our prayers are not like the wishes granted to us by some magical genie. We've all seen the cartoons where Bugs Bunny or somebody else got 3 wishes and then messed up and said something, they wished something that they didn't really want, and then there went that wish. I'm glad God hears our prayers. He considers our prayers. And then he answers our prayers according to his will and not ours. Often that results in what we might consider unanswered prayers. And we even say, I'm thankful for unanswered prayers. I think I was really thinking about that today. I think that's a misnomer. I don't know that there is such a thing. Silence is an answer. I mean, have you not ever asked a dumb question of somebody and they just look at you? I mean, that was an answer. Wasn't the one you wanted. It wasn't what you expected, but it was an answer nonetheless. I don't know that there is unanswered prayers. I think sometimes our prayers are pretty stupid, and God just looks at us in silence and says, you don't really want that. You don't really need that. That's not really what's good for you right now. Here Elijah prays for something unwise and I believe not according to God's will. Notice a couple things real quick. A desperate entreaty. Verse number 4. It is enough now, O Lord. Take away my life. A year and a half ago, as I said, I would have been much harsher on Elijah's plea than I probably am tonight. those who have never endured great mental, psychological, or spiritual suffering, you're probably going to read this and have trouble finding much sympathy and compassion for Elijah. But I want to say his problems were not imaginary, they were real. His problems were not imaginary, but they also weren't permanent. And that's the hitch. That's the crux right there. You see, Satan gets us down in a hole of despair and anxiety, and he'll make us begin to believe that as bad as it is now is the way it's always going to be. That those problems are not just passing problems, but they're permanent problems. And that there's no hope, and it's not going to get any better. In the darkness of that moment, Satan will come and convince you that there's no hope, that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and the best and the only alternative to relieve that suffering is death. Now, Elijah, I think, respected God enough and the sanctity of life enough that he wouldn't dare contemplate taking his own life, but he sure prayed for God to take it. And believe you me, I get it. There were times last year when I couldn't sleep all night and I was walking around, and I probably prayed the same thing as Elijah. I couldn't believe at that moment that I would ever get to the point where I am now, where I can go to sleep just about as good as I did before all that happened. At that moment, I thought, that'll never happen. Not with any solution that I care to pursue. Not without heavy medication or some other type of thing. I couldn't believe that I could ever escape that. I know for the majority sitting here, it's difficult for you to read this and comprehend it and identify with Elijah's entreaty. But for those of you who know, let me say you have a pastor who knows. And he sympathizes with you. And once again, I remind you, I don't find any condemnation from God here, only compassion. We see a desperate entreaty. We see a deficient evaluation. Look at verse number 4. It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. You say, what does that last statement mean? Here's really what I believe it to mean. I believe Elijah's saying, I'm worthless. My life is worthless. It's meaningless. It's empty. And life can beat you down to the point where you can feel that way. Where you can feel that your life is meaningless and worthless and without consequence. And I want to tell you tonight, that's never true. I want you to, when you drive home tonight, because I have no doubt you'll see some. When you drive home tonight and you see those people out there wandering the streets all over this city and all over this state, I want you to think about that's somebody's brother, that's somebody's sister, that's somebody's daughter or son, or even somebody's mom or dad. Not without consequence. One of the reasons I love that Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life, is the message in that movie is that every life has meaning. And every life touches other people's lives. And I know you can sit here and you can say, well, I'm not married, or I'm just single, or I don't have a lot going on, or blah, 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 I'm older, or blah, blah, blah. And you can say, what good am I? You matter to somebody. And you mean to somebody. If nothing more, you mean something to this pastor. Because when I look out here tonight, Dawn can already tell you, I'm looking out tonight and I'm already seeing who's not here, and I'm asking, where's so-and-so? Where's so-and-so? And it's not because I don't love the people that are here. I do love you. I love you so much that when you're not here, I notice. And you mean something to me. Your life has value. Your life has meaning. And Elijah's life has great purpose and meaning, though at the moment he couldn't see it. And aren't you glad God doesn't answer all our prayers the way we want? That He doesn't give us everything we ask Him. We see the plea of Elijah. We see the problems of Elijah. But lastly tonight, I want you to see the pity for Elijah. Well, most often, the messages that I've heard out of this passage, some of them glibly say, condescendingly say, or talk about Elijah's pity party, and I've probably done some myself. That sentiment, those messages often take on a very condescending, condemning tone that lacks of compassion. I'm glad that those who take that approach are not my God, because my God is compassionate. He's not condescending. He's loving. And you know what I see all from God in these last 3 verses we're going to read? I see nothing but compassion. I don't find any condemnation. I don't find any rebuke. I just see compassion. Look at verse number 5. And as he lay and slept under a juniper tree, behold, then an angel touched him and said, Arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was a cake baking on the coals and a cruse of water at his head, and he did eat and drink and laid him down again. And the angel of the Lord came again the second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. I want you to see, first of all, an angelic assistance. I was fighting tears. Dawn couldn't tell it, but as I was reading those verses this morning, I was thinking about times in my life where I was laying under a juniper tree. And times in my life where it seemed like God sent an angel, or the angel of the Lord, and I'll talk about that in a moment, came and touched me. I want to tell you, Touched by an Angel is not a television show. It's a real experience for the followers of God. And I'm not saying it happens often, but I'm saying it happens. I can remember we talked about this when we was home for my dad's birthday. Unfortunately, sometimes life, good things are wrapped up and intertwined with bad things. See, my brother got killed in a car accident on January 17th. That was the day before my dad's birthday. I'll never forget that night. I'll never forget those days after. But one thing, it's been 41 years now. One thing I can remember distinctly is sitting in that funeral home as a 12-year-old boy, struggling with life. Struggling why things like that happen. Brokenhearted, grieving. And I can remember it as good as I can remember the Taco Bell I ate for dinner. No, seriously, I can remember sitting on the front row of that funeral home, brokenhearted and in deep grief. And it seemed like the Lord just came sat right down beside me and put his arm around me. Said, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. It's not the only time. It's been other times in my life where I didn't know what to pray. I didn't know what to do. All I could do was just cry. And yet God just came and ministered. That's our God. That's who we serve. We don't serve an angry God who's ready just to smack us down. We serve a God who loves us. And I'll say tonight, Elijah may have been fearful, but he wasn't forsaken. And he may have felt alone, but God had not abandoned him. And neither has he abandoned you. The Lord knew Elijah needed rest, so he gave him rest. The Lord Elijah needed food, so he gave him food. The Lord knew Elijah needed strength, so he provided strength. And the Lord knows what you need too. The Lord's response was practical. Sometimes we consider a spiritual problem, or what we consider a spiritual problem is really just a physical limit. God didn't send Elijah a lecture and a rebuke. He gave him a pancake and a pillow. And he'll do that too. Notice an appropriate assessment. Oh, I like this. The angel said this. Verse number 7. Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. Sooner or later, you're going to discover that your journey is too great for you too. You're going to come to the end of yourself. You're going to come to the end of your limits. And then what are you going to do? You better have somebody you can lean on. You better have someone you can turn to. We hear people say all the time out of 1 Corinthians 10:31, well, the Lord promised he'll never give you anything more than you can handle. That's not what that verse says. God often gives us things that are too great for us. But I'm grateful tonight they're not too great for him. Amen. See, you need God. Life is too big, too difficult, too much for us to handle. Your life, sooner or later, will hit its limit. And when it does, you better have a good relationship with the Lord. Because in that moment, you're going to need him. Lastly, I see an amazing accomplishment. Verse number 8. And he arose and did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. You talk about a power bar. Right? You hear people today talk about, and there's a lot of people who look in the Bible and try and get all these health things, and you hear everybody today promoting Ezekiel bread. Give me an Elijah cake instead. Right? Ezekiel's got nothing on Elijah. What the Lord gave Elijah to eat, it lasted 40 days. The message here is this: God knows our needs, and he's able to meet our needs. He's able to give us grace and strength to go on even when life has hit its limits. To tap into his power, to tap into his might, to tap into his strength, and to grow in our dependency on him. Someone said this: God knows our frame, he remembers that we're dust, and he does not expect dust to do the work of iron. Pretty good. Have you ever been where Elijah was? the place where life had hit its limits. If you look in that place, you'll find a God who still loves you, a God that's not forsaken you, who still desires to strengthen and help you. I want to finish with these two verses. Isaiah 40, verse number 29. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Burnout is not the end of things. It's often the place where God begins to foster a deeper relationship with you. Has your life hit its limits tonight? I want Don to come to the piano. I just sensed that somebody out there like me needed this message today. With our heads bowed and our eyes closed, maybe we just want to take a moment of reflection and prayer. And if God spoke to your heart, maybe you just need to come bow down before Him and say, God,